This is from Anne, what's her name? I always mess up her last name. Boskamp? Yes, Boskamp. They pronounce it. Boskamp. So it's from her. It's a kind of like a parable. So maybe this is for you. It says this: I once heard of a man who split black ash and wove baskets. He wove prayer through every basket. The man wore faded plaid and old denim and lived alone high up in the Appalachians where the dirt didn't grow crops, but it could grow basket trees. He lived such a distance up the hill that he really didn't think the cost of transportation to come Saturday morning market would exceed any profits from selling the baskets. Nevertheless, each day he cut the trees, sawed them into logs, and pounded the logs with a mallet to free all the splint ribbons from those trees. The splint slapped the floor. As the basket-making man, he simply worked unhurried and unseen by the world, his eyes and his heart fixed on things unseen. When the heart is at rest in Jesus, unseen, unheard by the world, the Spirit comes and softly fills the believing soul, quickening all, renewing all within. Day after day, the man cut ash, pulled splint, stacked baskets. He said that as he held the damp splint, and he braided under and over, that God was simply teaching him to weave prayers into every basket and to fill the empty baskets and all the emptiness with eternal, unseen things. It was like under all those branches of those basket-growing trees, he knew what the clergyman James H. Augie wrote. As a weak limb grows stronger by exercise, so your faith will be strengthened by the very efforts you make in stretching it out towards the unseen. Come at the end of the year, after long months of bending over the baskets, bending in prayer, when his stacks of baskets threatened to topple over, the man kneeled down under those trees the baskets grew and lit those baskets with a match. The flames devoured and rose higher and crackled long into the night. Then come morning, when the heat died away, satiated, the basket-making man stood long in the quiet. He watched how the wind blew away at the ashes of all his work. To the naked eye it would appear that the man had nothing to show for his work. All the product of his hands was made papery ash. But his prayers had survived the fire. The prayers we weave into the matching of socks, the working of our hands, the toiling of the hours, they survive the fire. Love, relationships, worship, prayer, communion, all the unseen things, and centered in Christ. It doesn't matter so much what we leave unaccomplished, but our priority was in the unseen things. Again, today, that's always the call. Slay the idol of the seen. Slay the idol of focusing only on what can be seen, lauded, and noticed. Today, 1,000 times again today, I will preach his truth to the soul prone to wander, that wants nothing more than a gracious smile of our Father, unseen things, things unseen, invest in things unseen. The unexpected priority is always things unseen. Pray to your Father who is unseen, and your Father who sees what is done in secret. The things that are seen are transient, things that are unseen are eternal. To things unseen, the most important things. Though the seen product of the baskets may have gone up in the flame of smoke, it was the unseen prayers that rose up like incense that had changed the man, much like Thomas Carlyle, who said, "It's the unseen and the spiritual in people that determines the outward and the actual." When the heart and the mind focus on the unseen, that's when there's visible change in us. The outward and the visible only become like Christ to the extent that we focus on the unseen and invisible person in Christ. In truth, the ideas and images of men's mind are the invisible powers that constantly govern them, writes Jonathan Edwards. Turn these profound pages, and you will know it. Your heart and mind focus on the invisible kingdom. Then go ahead, weave your baskets, and the invisible kingdom will be made blazingly visible in our midst. I feel like some of us, sometimes we wonder if any of this matters. Sometimes it's hard to see progress, it's hard to see change, it's hard to see if our work means anything. But I felt like how important it was as I came across that and wanted to share that with us, to remember that what you're doing now is pouring into the unseen places in our kiddos' lives. Whether those kids are with us for a short amount of time for the rest of our lives, it's your love, it's your prayers, it's the grace that you pour in them, it's the steadfastness, those things that can't be seen. Those are the things that are eternal, and they very much are alive in your kids' hearts. So consider that and keep going. Tonight is actually a pretty special night. Tonight is our 7-year anniversary of starting this group. So I didn't even remember. Yeah, woohoo! I didn't even remember, and I saw a little Facebook reminded me. Good old Uncle Facebook. There to remind me of what we've been doing in the past. And man, 7 years. What a blink. And just in the past, I think we're trying to figure out how many people have come through these doors. And in the past 3 years, I believe, since we've actually been logging it with the computer, with the check-in system, there's been over 500 people. So I would assume to say that over 1,000 of us in this journey have come through here for support and to be served in their adoption foster journey. And so pretty remarkable when we think about the big picture. And that's what made tonight so special, is because Whitney is here tonight. And I don't believe by accident our original speaker wasn't able to last minute because of a scheduling conflict. And so it turned out Whitney was available, and Whitney's never been part of this group. But if it wasn't for Whitney, this group would never have started. 8 years ago, I sat with Whitney and I said to her, I said, here we're starting this church. We have a strong passion to help adopted families, adopted kiddos, foster families. What can we do? We have no idea where to begin. Like basket weaving, except you don't even know how to make a basket. I don't know. I don't know what to do. And she said, start a support group. Start a support group, because it's desperately needed in this county. And if you do that, that would be a great start. That's what we'll do. And so we started the church in April of 2012, and then in January of 13, so we weren't even a year old yet, we started our very first support meeting. And we've been doing it for the most part every month since. And so I want to thank you, Whitney, for being the voice of the Lord to commission us to start this group. Because not just for those who are here maybe for the first time ever to be able to experience support in a community that understands their needs. Literally thousands of people that have gone through this group have been blessed because of that commission that you gave us. And so you are a hero to so many of us. So thank you for being here tonight. Thank you for giving the time to impart a little bit of wisdom so that we can put another tool in our tool belt. So let's put your hands together for Whitney Bunker.
You're so sweet. Thank you so much. So, many of you, I've had the privilege of knowing your beautiful, wonderful, crazy, awesome, chaotic families. Right? That sounds about right. And some of you, I've never met you before. So, I'm Whitney. And in addition to being the director of City Without Orphans and co-founder with my husband, Dan, I'm also an adoptive and foster mom. So, I currently have a 12-year-old. She's a junior hire. You met me when I was in junior high. Now I'm a junior hire. That's weird. I still have to be like, I have a junior hire. She is 12, and then I have a 2-year-old. She's almost 3. My oldest came to our family through adoption, through foster care. And then my youngest came through a private infant domestic adoption, but I've also done foster care in between then and taken like teenagers that just needed a place to live and a lot of other random things. But so I've kind of done the gamut. People always ask us, like, are you going to adopt again? And right now I'm like, I think, I don't know. I've stopped planning. I really am in a place of surrender where I'm like, okay, God, like, if you want another child in my house, you're going to figure that out. For now, I'll just put one step in front of the other with what you've given me and leave the rest up to you. But I always get the pressure from the husband and the teenager that the bunker name dies if you don't have a pool. So, can't tell you what's going to happen, but it's possible. So, anyways, just to kind of give you a little background. Is that working? we are gonna, you can do it? Okay. So, all of us here have done the foster care and adoption process, or maybe we're in the thick of it right now, so maybe we've not completed it, but we're like right in the middle of it. Maybe you're a waiting family, okay? So when we start this process, oftentimes, here's what it looks like for us. Here's what to expect from the kids that are coming in your home. You meet with the social worker, and they talk to you, and they tell you, this is what to expect when you're fostering, right? Or here's the process you will go through to get your kids. Maybe you're waiting as an adoptive family, and so you're told about the process of the children coming into your home and what that wait may look like. Here's what you need to do to get your home approved, right? Here's the locks that you need to put on all your, unsafe things. Or here is the, there's so many things. All that to say, there's a ton of stuff that you're told by your agency to prepare for. But let's just be real as foster and adoptive parents is we rarely are told by our agency that this is what you can do in your own heart to prepare your own self to get ready in your own heart and relationship with your child. Because who understands that our children are the ones that can push our buttons and trigger us the most? Is me? Nope. Good. So this is what I'm going to talk about tonight in the journey that I think over the past couple of years God's really put on my heart to talk to families about, and in my own family. Really, we've been doing the hard work too, is owning our own stuff as parents and realizing that we have something to bring to the table. It's not just our kids. And sometimes when we react, it's really whose buttons are we really pushing? And so we're gonna get honest today. I'll be honest about my own journey, and you guys can have some time of self-reflection, but that's really where we're heading. And I just want to say, we're all in this together. We've all been through this journey where we've really struggled in our relationship with our kid or a spouse or just ourselves, like struggling with ourselves, like internally. And so there's no shame here, okay? I'm just going to say that. There's no shame. But we are going to get real together because I think this is an important message. So I love the next slide. I love this quote from Dr. Karen Purvis, God rest her soul. You cannot take a child where you have not been yourself. Okay, that's the truth here, is that we are supposed to be healing agents for our kiddos, whether, like Jason said, whether that's temporarily and there's reunification or whether that's forever. We cannot expect our child to do something that we aren't ourselves willing to do. It just doesn't work. And the reality is kids can sniff us out. Kids can sniff us out, and they know when we're real and we're not real, and when we're struggling. And so this is a healthy thing. It's a healthy thing before, like if you're here and you have not been placed with a kiddo and you're waiting, I beg you, please do the work now to get yourself ready in your heart and your mind and your spirit to process the things that may be, whether that's expectations or your own past traumas or whatever that is. If you are here and I'm a walker, so I'm going to, if you're here and you are struggling in your home right now, in your relationship with your kids or your kid or your spouse, and you're being triggered, it's okay. It's okay to be there. We all have been there, and it's okay to reach out for help. Okay, and I just want to remind you guys that our kids, they need to see repair as much as they need to see healing. I'm going to say that again. They need to see repair as much as they see healing. Because a lot of our kids who grew up in foster care and are old enough to remember, I mean, we can talk about the kids in utero too, but I'm just talking about the kids right now. They're old enough to remember to see broken relationship and not reconciliation and someone leaving and leaving things unresolved, right, over and over and over and over and again. They have no concept of what it is to struggle, to fall down, to get back up, to ask for help, to repair, to forgive. Like that was not modeled to them. And so I think a lot of times we as parents, we get so caught up in our own shame and our own issues that we're afraid to just be like, you know what, buddy, I screwed up. I lost my temper, and, or, hey, sweetie, you did something, and that really took me back to a place where I was remembering this in my childhood, and I struggled, like, when you reacted that way, like, that I struggled, and I'm sorry that I was emotional and that made you uncomfortable, whatever, all those things. Our kids need to hear that. Next slide. The reality is that our current and past relationships affect others, okay? And specifically, it affects our parenting, okay? So whether we recognize it or not, we will bring our past experiences, our values, into our current relationships, and specifically parenting. So many of you have had multiple different stories of growing up, 2 parents, 1 parent, all kinds of different experiences. Some of you had good experiences, some of you had bad, some of you had kind of in the middle, right? But we have to be realistic and understand that we will bring those things into our relationship. And just like a dating relationship, right? If any of you guys have ever dated or you're in marriage or engagement season, we must work hard to bring awareness into those areas of growth. So we talk a lot about premarital counseling for couples, right? And I know Jason, he does a lot of weddings, and I'm sure he does a lot of premarital counseling or refers people out. Think about this in that foster care adoption time. Sometimes we compare like adoption to a wedding or a marriage. It's just as important when couples focus just on planning the wedding and not the marriage. Ooh, that can be scary. So just as we are going into adoption or we're going to new season, whether that's preparing to be placed with a child or preparing for a different season, parenting my little Angelina when she was 5 is different parenting her at almost 13. So we have to, just like we would in a relationship, continually reflect and be aware of our areas of growth. And again, as I said, our kids trigger us. And unknowingly or knowingly, they trigger us. Is this working now? No. Yes? Oh. Okay, sorry. I was like, yeah. Okay. So, push the buttons. I love this graphic, right? Our kiddos push our buttons. And I know I'm not the only one that can be honest that there's a lot of little things that are like my pet peeves, right, in parenting that get under my skin with my kiddos. But I feel like over the years, as I've learned more about my own history and my story growing up and the way that I was parented and then my own journey into parenting, I've realized that actually more of my buttons have to do with my own stuff than really my kiddos. So next slide. I want to give an example through this video. I absolutely love this video because I feel like it gives the perfect example of how we could project ourselves into our kids sometimes in situations that we don't expect.
Shopping should be a rather enjoyable family outing. But it was not. Even though I encouraged my 2 sons to pick whatever they liked, I would, inevitably, criticize the color, style, size, and the price of their choice. After long deliberations, we would leave the store with our purchases, but feeling tired and frustrated. I didn't want to act this way, but I repeated this every single time, often apologizing to my children on the way home. One day they asked me, "Didn't you like to get new shoes as a kid?" An overwhelming no flooded through my body. That guttural reaction was probably as telling as it gets. Well, I was one of 9 children. My mom mom always took us shopping when there was a sale. I would usually fall in love with something new that wasn't on sale, which would automatically be denied by my mom. My sister, on the other hand, had special narrow feet, so she could purchase anything she wanted because her size was seldom on sale anyway. I felt angry and neglected, but was told to be grateful that I was easy to fit. By the time my mother had found shoes for all of us, she was exhausted and nervous about spending money. I was lost in a sea of emotions and just wanted to go home. As a parent, Mary had a mental model of shoe shopping that was superposed upon the actual experience she was having with her children. When something triggers a leftover issue, the emotions come first. Then, the mind often tries to rationalize why you're feeling this emotion and looks for reasons. Questioning children's choice of shoes based on their price, size, or even style isn't wrong per se, but it is when guided by unprocessed feelings. Leftover issues influence the way we perceive, experience, and react to certain situations. Have you ever felt like your kids are pushing your buttons? Where do you think these buttons come from? Many people believe that only those with big, unspeakable childhood traumas need to examine their past. I picked this story about shoe shopping because it shows how seemingly trivial events and feelings during childhood can intrude on your life years later. Emotional baggage clouds our interaction with children and creates needless frustration and conflicts. Parenting from the inside out looks at personal stories like this one and scientific research and provides tools and exercises to help make sense of the past. Because understanding our past can free us from repeating it, reading this book is a good step towards building deeper relationship with our children and a happier life for ourselves.
So I love the book. I'm a huge Daniel Siegel fan. And Parenting from the Inside Out is a really great book that we, can you go to the next slide, that we highly recommend. So I want to do a little bit of like response time for you guys. So what is something that your parents did growing up that you said you would never do, but then you catch yourself doing? Anyone? Say it out loud. Your parents yelled and you were like, I'm not going to yell at my kids someday. Yeah. Anyone else? Too busy with work. Yep. That's guilty. Anyone else? Criticizing? Yes. Yep. This is like a funny random one, but my mom walks super fast, like super fast walker, like she speed walks everywhere, and I was so annoyed growing up. This is what my intern from Fresno Pacific just gazed up at me right now and goes, oh my God, you do that. That's exactly what I was about to say. Growing up, I was like, she walks so fast all the time. Why is she always such a Why does she walk fast? And literally, my family is always like, why are you walking so fast? I said I would never be a fast walker and just like rush everywhere and be like, do that. And I'm not lying. I have somebody who sits with me multiple days a week. So that we all have things. Okay. So if you have children, and you know, what is one thing that your child does to push your buttons? If you don't have children yet, what is one of your pet peeves that someone does that like they violate it? You're like I hate nails on the chalkboard, or like anyone who like scrapes something, you know, that kind of thing. But just throw out like something. You don't have to think a name or anything, but just throw out like a thing. Repetitive asking. Yeah. Provoking, yeah. Oh, yeah. Lying, yes. Disrespect, yes. Yeah. Yeah. Exactly. I have a future lawyer on my hands. That's what I say, because we're constantly arguing everything, and I'm like, do you even need to argue the color blue? Like, so I try to look at that as straight space most days, and then there's days when I'm like, stop arguing everything. And anybody else? Oh, yeah, the opposite of me. Yes, you've got an Eeyore on your hands. Oh, bless your heart. Anyone else want to share anything? No. Okay. So we all kind of feel like, yep, I see you. Like a lot of us nodded heads and the other person. So we're totally all in the room, and we get that. Next slide. I have a paper over here. Okay. So let's really face it. We all bring something to the table, right? Emotionally or relationally. And some of us have things that bug us. And that's normal. Pet peeves are normal. We also have little t and big T traumas. So big T traumas some of us had would be like, abuse, a parent dying, things that are kind of like bigger trauma things. Unfortunately, some of us have those in our background, and so that does affect us as parents. And then some of us have little T traumas. There's still things that happen to us that maybe on the scale of like losing a parent or abuse is not that high, but they still affect you. I mean, I grew up, my dad, I grew up in the Bay Area, and my mom's family was from Fresno, big Mexican extended family in Fresno. And my dad lived in the Bay Area, met my mom, and when I was about 5, they decided they would move to Fresno because they didn't want me to be not raised by my extended family. Well, you would think that was as simple enough as we just up and leave. Well, my dad couldn't get a job transfer, so between kindergarten and 3rd grade, I only saw my dad on the weekend for 3 years, and they're very formative, and I'm very close to my dad. And some of you guys know my dad and know me and know that I'm close with him. And my dad would he would drop me off in the morning for school and then leave back to the Bay Area, and I would sob, right? So it's hard because I don't really consider that a big T for me, because my dad was still like present in my life, my parents weren't separated and all of that, but and there was a resolve to it, and then when he came back, like everything was great, but it's still a little T trauma in my life that like I have had to address with him, with a therapist, with my husband. I've talked to him about some of these kind of controlling anxiety things that I struggle with, and maybe that's rooted out of some of those things that I operate relationally with. So that would just be kind of example of some of those things as we're kind of self-reflecting. So next slide. Okay, so in the Parenting from the Inside Out book, there is, in the back of the book, I recommend everyone get it, but there is a questions for parental self-reflection. So that is the orange thing on your table. I want each of you guys to have one, not per couple, each of you. So if you don't have one, will you raise your hand? And Vanna, White, Jason will grab you one. So while you guys are having your hands up, I'll flip it. I normally tell the story after, but there's so many of you that don't have it, I'll flip it. So I was required to do this and have like a therapist look it over when I was doing a parent trainer in Texas for Empowered to Connect. Daniel and I went and got trained in Texas to be parent facilitators, and we did this, and it was quite interesting. So we were asked to fill it out, and then when we went to Texas, they went over it with us. And at the time, we had my daughter maybe 9 months, 10 months, my oldest, when we went to this conference and did this. I was struggling a little bit with her in one particular area that I kept over and over and over getting so worked up about, and I was like, what the heck? Like, why? after, like, I'd have my little parental moment, I'd be like, whoa, like, why am I flipping my lid? Like, this is silly. Well, I took these questionnaires, and I really broke it down to realizing that I was having a parental barrier with my kiddo, because I grew up in a family system that is so different than what my childhood experienced, particularly in the area of independence and maturity. Okay, so I was raised in a home where I have a half brother that's 8 years older than me. So I was basically around adults all my life. And my brother, was 8 years older, so he was older too. I have no younger siblings. I had parents, and I loved them dearly, but they worked for many, many, many years, like 50, 60 hours a week. And so there was a lot of, being independent and going to grandparents' house and all of that. And again, this is not to bash them. I've talked about this stuff with them, so they know what I've processed. But so I had that, and I was constantly being praised for being more mature, right, than most people my age. I was constantly praised for being independent. Okay. So I became a first-time mom at 26 of a 5-year-old who acts 2, not independent, not mature. Do you think that was a trigger button for me? That's what came out on my self-reflection evaluation. That I was coming into a rut because my expectations for my child was the same what was put on me, and that's unfair to my kid. And in some instances, it may have been unfair to me too. In some instances, I had a great childhood, but there's just little things you have to grow up sometimes a little too fast, because there's things that you've got to do. But I now was like, I've made sense of that. That is what is bugging me. And so, did I ever come back to the situation where she would do something completely immature, or she'd want to be so dependent on me to the point where I'm like, right. Yeah, I still had these moments, right? But instead of projecting them on her, I had awareness to say, Whitney, this is bothering you, and this is why, like in my head. And I could stop and say, okay, I get it. I know I am being triggered. Like, this is bringing stuff up with me. And even just the self-awareness can de-escalate what could be a big blow-up. Because I was able to stop, reflect, think, be aware, and say, okay, this is actually about me. My kid is trying her best with the cards that she was dealt with. Like, really, though. She didn't ask to have the things that happened to her. And so that gave me an opportunity to really be like, okay, I'm going to try to turn this around. And it helped. It helped. So I'm going to ask you guys, get a pen, and maybe we can put some music on, and I'm going to give you, I'm going to give you 10 minutes to reflect on these questions. This is not going to be enough time for you guys to actually dig deep into it, but I want you to read all of them first. Then I want you to jot down some little thoughts and notes. Take this home and think through this more thoroughly, and think through those things that might be something that we just need to self-reflect on as parents. go, go, go. So here you are with kids in childcare somewhere. So taking a second to just reflect can be really helpful. So give me one more minute. And we'll All right. So one thing that has been helpful for me to learn in parenting to help me understand where I'm at in my parenting style, and then also where my kids will be at or are at, is learning about adult attachment styles. Okay, so I'm going to get a little bit more like in the social work brain of Whitney, and I went like real deep in the parenting brain of Whitney, so I'm going to flip over on that. So the next slide. It's crazy to learn, actually, before I go into deep talking about secure attachment, it's crazy to learn in the research that I've done that a child's attachment style is 80% reflective of the caregiver they have. Okay, so whatever your attachment style is as a parent, that's 80% likely what your child will be. Now, some of us, we didn't get our children from starting, fresh out of the hospital. Some of us did get our children fresh from the hospital. But nonetheless, those of us who didn't, and we had a child in care, or the child has been in multiple homes, right, with multiple caregivers, they are going to have disorganized attachment. It is actually 75% of kids who grew up in foster care or have been in foster care, they are going to naturally bend with disorganized attachment because of all of this, right? We know the attachment cycle and how it's supposed to be started as far as, baby and co-regulation and the nurture and the structure and all of that. But there is some really encouraging things. So basically, one of the things that is used in addition to the adult attachment reflection kind of thing you guys just did is there is also some psychologists that created adult attachment interview. And so you can meet with a clinician who basically kind of goes through your childhood and your relationships and your attachment and can kind of give you some points, not based off of what you're saying, but how you're saying it and what's happening. So I'll give you an example. When I went to that training in Texas, I told you that we did this one that you guys did and then had an extensive time. But adult attachment interviews, like the psychologist that has to be trained for it, it's very expensive. It's a very specific type of like training that the psychologist or the therapist has to have. Does that make sense? So it's not like an easy thing to just like come by. So there was 40 of us that are being trained, so we didn't get to all get that, right? But the trainer, one of the parent trainers, the father, he allowed permission to the therapist to record his adult attachment interview. Pretty incredible. And we got to watch it at the training, like his actual interview. And I'll never forget like watching this video, and one of the questions that the therapist asked him was, give me an example of a time that your dad disciplined you. And he kept saying, well, one time after church, I was being sassy and this and that, so my dad spanked me. And she said, okay, give me another example of a time your dad disciplined you. And he said, well, one time, I was being disrespectful and he swatted me with a belt. Okay, and so she kept asking the question over and over again to see what types of things. He would always give answers about punishment. Like punishments. Not, he never gave answers about discipline. Like, one time, I had a situation where I was misbehaving and my dad came and sat with me and was like, look, you're being disrespectful. I'm going to ask you to apologize. I'm going to have you go over here. We're going to talk about this. You're going to reconcile with your sibling. We don't do that. There was no, the root word for discipline is disciple, right? There was no examples of discipling in his childhood that he could think of. And it was his parent, and it was his dad who was the one who was the authoritarian, not authoritative, right? So we've got the different, you have the permissive, right? The authoritarian, the authoritative. Mom was super permissive, dad was super authoritarian. So, what do you think his go-to parenting trigger, he was going high structure, high punishment, 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 punishment. And he had adopted these kids and they were being triggered by all this punishment and he couldn't figure it. They kept having all these issues where they were acting, the more he would up his structure and lower his nurture, they would just react more and more and more and more. And he realized through his AI that he had no concept of that. And that needed to be relearned. He needed to see what that looked like. That needed to be modeled to him with some other relationships or through friendships and, the way that he has a male friend who parents his child or whatever. He just realized he didn't have that. So this is a helpful tool as well. Next slide. So, anyways, so secure attachment. This is the goal. This is where we want to get. The encouraging thing about attachment is you don't have to stay in the same place. I know that we have kiddos that struggle with attachment issues and sometimes we have attachment diagnoses, but I'm just talking about in the general for us, okay? Not our kiddos, for us, okay? So, we as parents of kids from hard places, we come at secure attachment two ways, okay? So you had a securely attached caregiver or two, and therefore you're securely attached, correct? Or you didn't have securely attached caregivers. They were not securely attached. They're one of these other styles. But you have earned secure. So God is so gracious, and he gives us relationships in different ways that can help heal us. And so whether that's your church community, whether that's a friendship, maybe you had a grandmother or an aunt, somebody, someone who was able to give you that. And so you worked through some of that stuff to get to a securely attached place. That's our goal for us as parents. Not that we won't have tendencies, okay? I have a secure attachment style, but I also have dismissive tendencies because I had a dismissive parent. And she's wonderful, but she had two dismissive parents. So her go-to for parenting stuff, again, just so you know, those of you who know my mom, we've talked about this. So I don't want you to be like, you talked about my, she knows, I'm secure with my parents. My parents are at a place where they're like, yeah, let's talk about it. I know, I have my stuff, you have your stuff, cool. So, all that to say. But my mom grew up with parents that didn't acknowledge emotions, were more punitive, my grandpa's not emotionally available. My mom's dad never said I love you, not nurturing at all. And so my mom has earned secure, but also dismissive tendencies. So not surprising that I am earned secure. I'm secure. My dad is secure. My mom is earned secure. I'm secure with majorly dismissive tendencies. And my husband and my kids have to call me out on it sometimes, and I have to be aware of that, and that's okay. So, so those are the, whoops, we lost the PowerPoint. So that is and you guys can read the descriptions, but it's usually characterized by valuing of relationships, and a flexibility and an objectivity when speaking about relationships that you have. Secure parents always exhibit coherent integration of past, present, and future. So they understand, they can talk about their past and say, yes, this is where I came from, and this is where I am now, and this is where I'm working towards, like, and owning, like, it hasn't been perfect, but I'm making sense of it. Does that make sense? That basically, it helps you, define what that is. Okay, so the next attachment style is dismissing, okay? And dismissing is a very common attachment style for those who maybe had parents that were disconnected emotionally or intimacy. That's why I said about my grandpa, who I love so much, but bless his heart, he probably had emotionally distant parents too. He's emotionally distant, therefore, all of that goes down and down. So they tend to be predominantly left brain, so shut off the right brain of feelings and flooding of emotions. We make a neural pathway in dismissing to kind of shut that out, and the left brain of logical and linear and structure wants to be predominant, right? So if we're a dismissing parent, we often have trouble recalling details maybe of our childhood, and have trouble specifically having details that are like emotionally driven, and they're more of just like, oh, I remember doing this. Do you know what I mean? Like very practical, and not like, I remember how I felt and what we did and what the interactions were. It's just very logical. So dismissing characterized unresolved trauma that appears to cause abrupt shifts in the parent's state of mind, which sometimes can disorient children. Okay? So next slide, we have entangled, preoccupied. So this is an interesting beast with entangled, preoccupied, because I feel like my notes, for some reason, the back of them aren't here, so I'm going to stand up here. Okay, so we basically have a lot of issues making sense of our past as well, but we have issues in the flood of the left brain, in the logical, and we become emotionally clouded if this is our attachment style. We definitely get easily overwhelmed thinking through our fears and our past, and oftentimes when we're recalling situations that were traumatizing or in relationship with our parents, it's kind of all over the place. Like, it's not succinct in a kind of pretty bow where we can kind of say this was our past, this is our present, this is our future. It's just kind of jumbled. And so it causes many of us who have disorganized attachment to not be fully present and to have a hard time engaging with our kiddos. Okay. So the next one is unresolved. Okay. And this is the one that's really really hard for kids from hard places, because you're basically going to do a lot of co-triggering with each other if we have unresolved, and it's basically we have unresolved trauma, and that causes us to have abrupt shifts in mind, and that can be really disorienting for our kiddos. We lose our capacity to tell our story in a flexible and certain way. We rely heavy on revisiting emotionally a lot of our loss and our trauma. And parents with this predominantly unresolved attachment styles are prone to frightening their child because they cannot organize their own feelings. And so for our kiddos, we are their place of safety. Like, we are the place that they go to and are like, okay, if mom's not okay, I'm not okay. And so that's why it's important. And again, this isn't to shame, but just to say, like, if you are here and you're like, I really feel like I either identify fully with one of these attachment styles, or I have tendencies. Like I said, like I feel like I'm mostly in this lane and then have dismissive tendencies. It's good to be able to process that with someone. So, go to a therapist, talk with a counselor, talk with Jason, talk with people. Me, I'm here to talk. Talk amongst yourselves. It's an okay place to be when you're aware. Like, awareness is not our enemy. It's our helper, and so that's where we want to be. So next slide. So the cool thing is I don't want you guys to be discouraged. There's you. So we have a lot of clinicians that I would encourage you guys to connect with. Many, Jason knows, some of them have come here to speak. Others of them you may not know, but I can connect you to. Get the book Parenting Inside Out, because that is an amazing book, and you won't regret looking through it and just remembering what you bring to the table. And the last thing I'm going to shamelessly plug is this class, which Ashley Phelan was supposed to be the speaker tonight, and you got me, sorry, but she can come back, which I think would be really good. I would love for her to come back, because what she teaches is like part 2, which is more of like the strategy. So I'm kind of laying down the like educational foundation, and then she gives you the strategy. So I only have an hour, so it's not enough time for me to, I gave you a couple of resources, but it's not enough time. I'll do question and answer, and if you want to ask me a question, I'll try to give you some stuff, but it's just an hour. With making sense of your, this is making sense of your past worth is really what it's called, but she likes the title Making Sense of Your Worth. But I'll be honest with you, this class is really to help you make sense of your past, maybe if you have not a secure attachment style because of your upbringing. And this is a women's only one. There's a men's version too. But it's really powerful because it forces you to look at some of those lies that you've believed, some of those false belief patterns that you have in your life. That maybe is kind of your go-to thing, and it helps you identify them. The exercises and the activities that they do in the class are super helpful in healing. Like, I went to Texas and I spoke. I basically did this very same thing in Texas in a big orphan care ministry conference, and the lady who created this Making Sense of Your Passport, Cindy Lee, she's an author and someone who runs the Halo Project in Oklahoma. Long story short, she walked us through one of the exercises, and it was super powerful. And well, actually, she walked us through 2 exercises, and I'm only going to talk about one, but the other one I think would be great for Ashley to talk about. But one of the things she did is she threw up this baby picture, and it was these 3 chunky, gorgeous babies, like all different races, just fresh chunk roll babies that you just like look at in the whole audience. I mean, there was hundreds and hundreds of people. Right? When she threw that up. These are like babies that are like giggling and naked and all the cute stuff. You're just like, And she basically said, look at these babies, okay? I want you to look at these babies. Now I want you to tell one of these babies that they're ugly, that you hate them, that they're not worth anything, that they're all the things, right? All the things that they're fat, that they're ugly. What do we tell ourselves? The stupid lies we tell ourselves, that you're not good, they're not good enough. What is it, right? People are like, I can't do that. I'm like, no, tell the screen, like the baby was here, right? And she's like, so you can't do that. These are precious babies made in the image of God, and you just like want to pinch their cheeks through the picture. But God thinks about you the same way. That's what you are to Him. And you tell yourself those things, that you're not good enough, that you don't measure up, that you're not enough. And so that was really like, the whole place was like, and it was really powerful. So that was just one little exercise that they did, but there's a lot of great things. So this class starts next week, and I just recommend you, it's not full yet, but it is getting more signups. It's actually going to be held at VMS's counseling center. It's not a VMS thing, but we needed a space to meet, and she said we could there. So it's at Victoria Sanders Counseling Center. But yeah, so I want to leave some time for questions, if that's okay, because I know it's good to talk through some of these things, or if you need something specific. But That's my shameless plug of that. So, any questions? Do you have another mic, or do people just shout it out? Okay, or I can bring it to them. Anyone want to talk? Any questions? Any thoughts? Wow. Thank you then. Okay, good. I think it's important for us right off the bat to remind our kids that we don't just have to stay in one of these styles. So explaining, like right off the bat, just telling them, like, look, there's these different styles, these styles of attachment, and, you know, as your caregiver, my job is to kind of help nurture and guide you and discipline you and train you up in the way you should go. But yet, you know, we don't have to be stagnant in them. So starting with just, especially kids in hard places, helping them understand, like, you don't have to live in this one area. There is growth. So that kind of starts in that strength-based, positive way. But essentially, I think a lot of it has to do with they are so young, so they're still developing their attachment styles. So you don't really fully get an attachment style until you get, there's like attachment styles-ish where it's like you're displaying a disorganized attachment, but it isn't really like rock solid until you're an adult. Does that make sense? Rock solid. How do I explain that? It's not solidified to be like a strong attachment style until you're older. That's why so many kids can come from foster care into a really rough attachment, like from a really rough attachment home into a home that has healthy attachment. They could be there for 9 months and learn some skills that are healthy attachment, and then they can go to like an aunt and a relative placement and then use that skill over there. So it's mostly about like the relational skills and healthy coping skills and good interpersonal skills and all of that. So I think that is where we need to like hone in more with our kids than like being like, hey, let's identify your style. It's more of you as a parent that can see like, okay, I can tell just based off the way like they don't let me comfort them, or 1 second they let me comfort them and the next second they're pushing me, or you know, they shut down, where we learn all the different styles and say, I can see these tendencies in these kids, so that looks like they're leaning towards this dismissive. But we've seen a lot of kids come into care that they can get to the earned care. I know a lot of former foster youth. I talked to tons of former foster youth, and they can get there. And some of them don't get there until they're 35, and some of them get there, you know, pretty quickly. And some of them, they don't get there. I'm just being honest. They don't. But there is hope to get there. So I think it's more of just those skills than anything. When I did this session at this conference, somebody asked me about what happens when you have 2 different parents with 2 different styles, attachment styles, which is really common, right? It's very common in a 2-parent household to have 2 different attachment styles. And so I answered it 2 different ways. One is, I think often the primary caregiver, I'm just going to be honest, you tend to lean more towards that attachment style because they're physically more present with that child, if that makes sense. And so I see a lot of patterns of the primary caregiver attachment style showing either transferring over to being the same or showing some of the tendencies. But then sometimes you also get the combo where they're a little secured, a little dismissive, or, you know, they've got unresolved and entangled, you know. So you kind of get that split. All right. Well, thank you guys so much for having me, and hopefully you got some good resources tonight.
Thank you so much, Whitney. Yeah, so fill up the class. How many seats you got left in that class coming up? Handful? 4. Oh, ooh. We're going to arm wrestle for it. So talk to her if you're interested in that. But we'll definitely be doing our best to get Ashley here for part 2. Thank you so much. A few things before we go rescue our children's workers. Next month, Keith and Joan Martin are going to be joining us from Kingdom Ministries. This is the first time we've done something like this, but I believe it's really important. Our kids are holistic beings, right? That means mentally, physically, emotionally, and spiritually. And they're going to be coming next week to talk to us about how do we pray for our children. So how do we meet that specific need through prayer, and how does that need connect to our kids at that soul level, soul healing. And so it should be a really great night. We never tackled something like that yet, and but again, our kids deserve attention in all facets of their being. So that's next month. Also, the certificates are on the TV cart. If we're all out, we'll print some more. We can easily do that. And there are like 3 giant bags of teddy bears. If you have, I was gonna say a little one, but you know, there's like 12-year-old girls that still love teddy bears, right? You know, grab a teddy bear or a 17-year-old boy. I don't care. Just take a teddy bear, because I don't want 3 bags of teddy bears here later, because I don't know what I'm going to do with them. Like drive around Fresno, you know, and here's a teddy bear. So take a teddy bear. So anyway, thank you guys for being here tonight. Maybe do this at your tables. If somebody's brave enough to just, well, I'll do it. I'll close this in prayer now, because it's time, almost time. I hear them coming through the wall. Let's pray. Lord, thank you. Thank you for the wisdom that Whitney has brought to us tonight. I pray, God, for now the courage to be able to look at our own lives, our own attachment styles, by going to those places in our lives and from our past and childhood of what shaped us in so many ways into the parents we are today, for better and for worse. Let us have the courage to look backwards, to be able to find places that need healing, to be able to continue to support those places that are strong, that have been passed on to us, that we may be able to give our kids the best of who we are and the best of our attachment to them, because they deserve it. And so, Lord, thank you again for this evening, and we just pray blessing on the rest of our night, the week, our month. We pray these things in Jesus' name. Amen. All right, guys, God bless you. Have a wonderful, wonderful week. With me.